Good morning, INTERWEB. Last time we began labeling our atlas. This time we're going to continue labeling our atlas, looking specifically at the labeling of land and sea features. So with that in mind, I updated my style guide here. So let's talk through all the various different new sections, talk about why I made the choices I did, and what cartographic conventions I was adhering to. First up, physical features. So this is how I'm going to label my physical features. This is all fairly self-explanatory. I suppose the only difference between a first order and a second order ocean is first order oceans are like main oceans. Second order oceans are like smaller oceans or features within an ocean. So like bays, straits, that kind of thing. The standard conventions for oceans is the use of a blue italic serif font, which is uppercase and tracked to fill out the space. You'll see that in action in a second. Same shtick with lakes and rivers, except instead of uppercase, you have mixed case. Stuff to do with water is blue and serif, basically. Stuff to do with mountains is generally marked in a non-italic serif font that can be either grey, black, or brown, and in uppercase. And island here is referring to like non-nation islands, so think of small islands around a country. So two further things to point out here. In the last video you saw me dragging and dropping an awful lot of my style guide onto the map and editing it there. There's another way of doing it, and that is you can basically create typographic templates. So if I select this chap here, I can go up to Window, Type, Character Styles. Now I already have that window open. It's this chap here. And all I have to do here is hit this plus icon to create a new style. And let's give it a name. Let's call this Ocean First Order. So now Illustrator has saved all the characteristics of that text that we can apply to any other text. So if I come over here and I write something, let's say testing, and let's give it a crazy font. Comic Sans will do. Let's make it really big. Let's make it regular, and let's make it hot pink. So we can take this text and then simply go over here and click, and then we have it formatted to our ocean. So that can be a really handy way of thinking about the typography in maps. And the second point to note is that the labeling of rivers is a little bit different to what we've been doing. That is, the general convention is to use spline text that follows the contour of your feature. So if I scroll down to my river here, what I would do to label it, I would hit N on my keyboard for the pencil tool, and I would draw a line out that roughly follows the contour of the river. Then I would hit T on my keyboard from the text tool, and I would click somewhere here perhaps. And what Illustrator does is Illustrator will take text and wrap it to that path, which is exactly what we want for river labeling. So let's call this Blue River, and let's hit I on our keyboard to grab the style for our rivers, something like that. So now you'll note here, if I zoom in, you'll note that there are three handles here. The way this works is that this handle controls where the start of the text is, so you can shift your text along the path, and this handle here controls the end of your text. Useful if you have it, say, right aligned. You can drag the alignment this way. In general, it's probably a good idea to keep things center aligned, and then that way you can move both handles around the place. This chap here, he's not really useful. What he does is he flips text over. We don't want that. That'll mean upside down text. No good. That is the labeling of physical features done. Next up, here's some of the symbols I'm going to be including in this video to do with land and sea features. Pretty much all self-explanatory here. For these three up here, the top part here is the name of the peak, volcano, or mountain pass. I have it in brown font, just like my previous lettering. And the bottom bit is the height above sea level of those features. An escarpment is basically a line of cliffs. I made a pattern brush of this as per the instructions in the previous video. Go check it out. Same thing with the coral reef and the flood tyke. These, I've all made custom brushes for these guys. Super simple to do. Check out the last video. Land and sea symbols, done. Finally, I want to talk a little bit more about how to mark rivers in a little bit more detail than what we've been doing. So far, I've only got first order rivers on my map, and that's entirely fine, but sometimes when you go to make maps, you might want to distinguish the order of river by stroke thickness, which is what I've got going on here. My primary river is thicker than my secondary river, which is thicker than my third order river. You don't have to do this, but it's kind of cool if you want to. When it comes to rivers and lakes and like, a dotted texture generally means some sort of impermanence. So if I wanted to make this river impermanent, I would simply give it a dotted texture, like so. Waterfalls, generally marked in as 2 lines to be superimposed over the river, super simple. Dams, very simple, all self-explanatory. In terms of lakes, we only have this chap at the moment. Again, you can make a lake impermanent with a dotted stroke. You can make salt lakes or lagoons by filling the lake up with a custom pattern. And I've opted for 3 dot space, 3 dots patterned all the way across the thing. A salt lake can be made impermanent by the dotted stroke, and it can be made a dried lake or a salt pan, for example, by giving the fill of your lake, giving it a null fill. So if I were to draw a bit of land over this, say something like that, you can see through it here, as in all the blue is gone, all the water is gone. It's a dried up lake or a salt pan. So it's worth knowing how to create these patterns because they can be super useful in terms of cartography. You make a pattern once, it'll do you for the rest of all existence. So let's delve into that a little bit before we start marking everything in on the map. So these are the 2 patches I made to create my pattern. This one here is for salt lakes or lagoon, has a blue background. This one's here is for dried lakes or salt pans. Same shtick, except the background has no fill, no stroke. So let's figure out how to create these. So I'm going to start off by drawing a square, giving it a blue fill, so bring fill to the front here, double clicking and selecting some sort of blue color, something like this perhaps. For now, I'm going to lock that layer, and then I'm going to hit P on the keyboard to bring up the pen tool. I'm going to go to the edge here until it says anchor, click, hold shift, till it says anchor, click. I'm going to give that shape I've just created no fill, so I'm going to hit / on my keyboard. I'm going to hit X to bring forward the stroke box, and I'm going to give it a dark blue stroke. Something like that. Then I'm going to go up to stroke, I'm going to go to dash line, and I'm going to say maybe 1 1 1 1 1 4, maybe? Yeah, something like that. I'm going to go Command C, Command F, to create a copy and paste it in place, and drag that copy all the way down to the bottom of the square until it clicks into place like so. Going to select both of these, and then I'm going to do the blend thing we've done numerous times throughout this series. Option, blend, blend option, specified steps, I'm going to say 8 is fine for the demonstration purposes. Option, blend, make, well not option, sorry, object. Object, expand, then hit OK, and then finally I also go option, path, outline stroke. This is destructive. It takes a stroke and makes it into individual shapes. Make sure you're happy with what you got before you do this. And finally, right click on all of that and hit ungroup. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take every second line here, just to add a bit of visual interest. I'm going to nudge it over somewhat. Something like that perhaps. And now what I need to do is I need to shape my background here such that this tile is repeatable seamlessly. So I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this chap up on top of this stroke until it clicks into place. Looking good, looking good. Then I'm going to take this chap here, I'm going to drag him in so it clicks into place like so. The idea here being that after this space, this will loop back around and hit the beginning of this stroke, which would allow for horizontal patterning seamlessly. Now this is a bit of a problem because we have a little bit of space, then a big space, and then the stroke will repeat again when we wrap this around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select those middle lines. I'm going to zoom in, Z on the keyboard, and then click and drag on the area. And hit V to bring up the move tool. I'm going to move it such that it clicks into place here. Now that's not going to be 100% perfect, but it'll be fine. We have dash, space, dash, space, dash, space. Should be grand. And finally, we want to make sure we can vertically stack these forever. When this wraps around after this chap, we need to go to one of these, which would be one of them. We can't just do that, because then when things wrap around, this will immediately come in contact with this. We need to add one more gap to the bottom or top here. So to do that, I'm just going to draw the shape to fill that gap. So I'm going to go from there to there, something like that. Drag the shape down till it clicks into place. Drag this chap here until this chap clicks into place. And then I'm going to get rid of all the excess. Now, again, this might seem a little bit confusing, and really it is trial and error, this sort of thing. You're basically just making a block that can be infinitely repeated in both the horizontal and vertical directions. Trial and error your way through it. So I think that is correct. So I'm going to select everything and hit G to group it all together. Once I think I got it, I go to Object, Pattern, Make. And then all of these boxes show up and everything's really terrifying. So Illustrator is going to give you a preview of your pattern here. And yeah, this looks pretty seamless to me. It looks like it just continues into infinity with no gaps. Perfect. Name your pattern something. So test pattern. And then if you're happy with the way it looks, simply hit done. So in the future, when you go to draw a shape, say something like this, you can select the shape, go to Window, Swatches, scroll all the way down until you find your pattern, test pattern, click, and there you go. And that right there is that. A quick guide of the various typographic styles I'm going to be employing, a quick guide of the symbols, some updates on how to do rivers and lakes, and a short introduction on how to create patterns and use them in Illustrator. Without further ado, it is time-lapse time. I'm going to mark in all the features, and while I do, I'm going to answer some of your questions. See you soon, Internet. So let's look at some of the YouTube comments from the previous video, Atlas Map 7, Borders, Cities and Towns. Will Machine 42 writes, I'm still confused how to cut out your page. The cutting out of the background map from the page is a non-essential step, so don't worry too much if you can't get it. That said, the basic method of cutting out shapes in Illustrator is done with the Shape Builder tool, so that's Shift M on the keyboard. And what I did was I created a rectangle that was the exact size of my page, and place that on top of my map. So I have the rectangle on top and my map on the bottom. I selected everything, hit Shift M for the Shape Builder tool, then holding Alt clicked and dragged through all the bits I don't want, and then Illustrator will go ahead and delete everything that isn't below that rectangle I've drawn. And then once that's done, you can get rid of the rectangle and all you're left with is the map within the bounds of the page. If you're super stuck, go back and look at some of the earlier videos in this series. I show people how to use the Shape Builder tool, and it's the exact same method. Lucy writes, anyone know how to create an effect similar to the blend tool in Affinity Designer? Lucy, I do not. I have no experience with Affinity Designer, but I'm going to put it in the show, so hopefully people in the comments will get back to you and leave you a whole bunch of methods. Ralphie Raccoon writes, are second level divisions common on country area maps? Yes and no. It all depends on how zoomed in you are. The area I'm covering on this map is actually quite small. I think it's about the size of Taiwan off the top of my head. So the scale is such that I can definitely work with second order divisions. But were I doing a world map, for example, I would not do that. In fact, the level of detail I would include on a world map would be country borders, main cities, and country names, and that's just about it. So the more you zoom in, the more detail you can pack into the map. The more you zoom out, the less detail you should be working with. It's your call. D. Paul writes, a tip for borders with two strokes of different opacity. Instead of drawing two paths on top of each other, you can use Illustrator's Appearance palette to add more than one stroke to a single path, and those strokes can have different styles and opacities. This is something I didn't know, so thanks a million D. Paul, throwing it in this video so everyone knows about it. Eos writes, I really like the Irish place names. I know you've said in the past that you don't know Irish. Has that changed? Or are you getting the place names from just being Irish? My Irish still sucks. As such, these names are actually not Irish, or at least not Irish as we currently know it. I will leave that up to you internet boffins to figure out what's going on. Nathan Ware writes, what is your process for deciding when borders shouldn't follow rivers and mountain ridges, or other natural barriers, like for particularly powerful nations or something? How do you think about drawing borders across open plains or steppes? So to put it really simply and without getting into too much detail, because again there'll be a video on this at some stage, I think of older borders as being the borders that follow physical features, and I think of newer, more modern borders as being borders that tend to ignore physical features. So like a colonial empire comes in, takes over a portion of land and just draws a straight line through it. Or modern countries form a treaty with one another and make their border just a straight line following a line of latitude. Also, you can deal with kind of straight borders if there aren't many physical features, like in steppes or plains. If there aren't many people in a section of land and there aren't many resources in said land, countries would have no problems just drawing a straight line through that region. Those are some of the things I think about, but there's loads of different ways you can get at non-physical feature following borders. Bryce the Great YT writes, is it fine if one doesn't take plate tectonics and whatnot into account? I'm not that great at plate tectonics and generally ignore it since I feel that people can make realistic landmasses without it. Nothing I ever say or do on this channel should be taken as a must. World building is a form of art, and as such, there kinda are no rules. You make up the rules. So you can do plate tectonics if you want, or not. It's entirely up to you. If the end product, after all is said and done, is something you are proud of and you find aesthetically pleasing and you find works for the project you're embarking on, then you did the right thing, plate tectonics or not. The goal of Artifexian always was to just cover various topics and hopefully people would pick and choose that which suits the projects they're working on. Kira Turner writes, is there a standard convention as to when to put all towns, cities, counties onto a map, as well as the country names, to avoid an overcluttered map, for example, or is it just a matter of personal preference? So largely, it is a matter of personal preference. As I said earlier, you need to take scale into account. But that being said, don't be afraid of clutter. If you look at reference atlases, you'll see that they are jam-packed, full of detail. It's kind of stylistic to be overly cluttered for these maps, and that's kind of what I'm aiming for in this series. So despite my minimalist tendencies, this is one area where I'm like, get down with the detail, put in as much detail as possible. Erin2718 writes, how would you handle unknown places or areas, terra incognita if you will, on an atlas like this? Say if there were world building reasons why certain areas had not been explored, but still needed to be included in the atlas, such as an island continent for example. So I would do two things. One, I would include a low level of detail for the unexplored region, for obvious reasons. And two, after your map is done, what you could do is you could create a white layer in the shape of whatever your unexplored region is, lay it on top of everything, and then set its opacity like 20 or 30%. That way you'll get kind of like a whitey, misty sort of feel over it, and it'll just sell the idea that it is unexplored and not much is known about that region. I may do that in this series just so you can see it in action. Okay, so that is that. Two things though. One, as you probably saw, I added in a third order for ocean, so now I'm thinking major ocean, smaller sea, and then bays, fjords, that type of thing. Also, you might have seen me use the pen tool to make bendy text. I should show you how to do that just in case. So P on the keyboard for the pen tool. If you click and drag, you'll click out these arrows here, and that'll be the direction of your curvature, and then click somewhere else. Click and drag, and you'll be able to set how the curvature is. After you've drawn your shape, you can edit it by hitting A on your keyboard to bring up the direct selection tool. Select your shape, and then if you click and drag any of these handles, you can alter the shape of the line you've drawn. If you click A in the middle here, you can drag out the curve some more. And if you want to edit just one handle, you can hold Alt and only one handle will get altered. And then you can wrap your text around the line once you're happy with it. So that is that. Leave any questions you may have in the comments and I will look at them in the next video when I begin laying down roads. I hope you enjoyed, Internet. See you soon. Good morning, INTERWEB. This series is based on the work of fantasy cartographer extraordinaire Nathan Mangion. Without him, this series would not have happened, so please go show him some love by checking out his links in the description of this video. You will love his work. Also, if you love my work and you'd like to support what I do here on Artifexian, consider picking up some merch over at teespring.com/stores/Artifexian. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all my wonderful patrons for help making Artifexian a possibility, including Alexander Roper, Andrew P Chehayl, John Hooyer, Ripta Pasay, Spencer Brownlee, Terrablae, and World Anvil. You all are amazing. Stay safe, and until next time, Edgar out.